handouts on your at your table. This is probably, thank you, the most important one. It's got some dates and a section for you to write notes. I am Janice Clark. I'm the gifted research teacher at Brickell. I see some familiar faces. I like to do a first grade parent workshop every year just to kind of familiarize you with the process of the gifted application. A few things have changed. Not a ton has changed, but feel free to ask questions that you may have along the way. Probably the most confusing thing is the terminology. What's the difference between screening and testing? You'll see the dates. You might say, what is the Brickell Academy? That's new this year. So I'll refer to all of that at some point in time through this presentation. And if you have questions, feel free to ask questions. You may want to wait until the end. It's kind of like I tell the kids when I do a lesson. A lot of times I'll answer your question along the way, so you may just want to jot it down. And then if I don't address it, you can ask it at the end. So here we go. The goals today really are to understand the entire process for the gifted screening, the referral, and identification. And I'm trying to talk really loud because I'm trying to pick up my voice on the iPad, so if I sound like I'm shouting, I probably am. So that is really kind of just go through the entire process. It really does turn into being almost a year-long process. It almost goes the entire length of your child's first grade year. So I'll kind of tell you what the benchmarks are along the way. And to understand the value of the parental input as it relates to the gifted referral and identification processes. That really is something that I want to harp on today, is the parental input and what the committee is looking for on that application that you do. So basically, here's the parts of the process. The screening. You'll notice on the sheet that I gave you with the dates, the screening at Red Mill is scheduled for October 26th. Basically what happens is every student, first grade student in Virginia Beach, gets screened in the fall. That used to be done later in the school year. It used to be done in like that January, February time frame, and it was a nightmare. Because a lot of times we wouldn't get the results back, we wouldn't get the list back until mid-February, and the applications were due March 1st. So you can imagine on the teachers, the turnaround time to get their part of the application done was really tough. So that's been a change that was initiated last year. It worked wonderfully. So that's been a huge, big help. So that's the first step, is that every first grader in Virginia Beach, unless they have some sort of an accommodation for an IEP that says that they can't be screened, will be screened. So that's across the board. On a side note, they also will be screened again in 5th grade, and that's across the board in the city of Virginia Beach too, because they, in case somebody's been missed along the way in elementary school, they give them an opportunity to try to pick them up again in that 5th grade year, and also they try to really get an idea of who might be good candidates for the Brickell Academy in middle school. So they will be screened twice. Even if they're identified in 1st grade, they get re-screened again in 5th grade. So that's something that's kind of new too. And that screening actually takes place before the 1st grade screening. So that, for us, was one of the 2 rain days that we missed. So we just had our screening. It was rescheduled for last week. So the second part of it is the application. The application is what in the past had been referred to as the referral. And you'll see why they changed it to the word application now, because it's an online application. Then comes the testing. The testing is the date that you'll see for March 29th. And it is after the application, but we'll talk a little bit about that, why it is due after the application. It really doesn't affect one way or the other. The gifted testing department has windows set up where they basically screen all 5th graders. And you can imagine there's only like 5 people that work in this testing department. So they're working at 55 elementary schools. So they screen all the 5th graders, they screen all the 1st graders, then they come and do our 2nd through 4th graders that are tested. That's like their next block, and then from there it goes into testing 5th graders, testing 1st graders from the screenings that took place in the fall. So they're very, very busy. They're also very, very helpful if you ever need to call them. So we'll talk about that towards the end. So the testing piece is what takes place in March. Identification, the identification committee usually meets. For 1st grade, it's usually the 1st week in May is when they'll actually meet. And then from there comes the notification and placement, and that's when you actually find out what the decision is. So you're talking, it's usually mid-May to the end of May. So when I say a year-long process, it really is a year-long process. So we'll get into these pieces today. So step 1 is the screening. Like I said, all 1st grade students in Virginia Beach schools are screened in either October or November. We're actually one of the first screening dates using the Naglieri Nonverbal Ability Test. Our screening is October 26th. The screening's completed by an assessment specialist from the Gifted Testing Office. I have nothing to do with the screening. I am really the middleman on this. I set up the schedule for them. I get class rosters ready for them. But as far as the actual screening, I have nothing to do with it other than here's your schedule. So I don't get to see the screening. Results of how the kids do are not discussed with me. Behavior issues are not discussed with me unless there's something that might have caused what they would consider an inconsistency in the test. They would address that with me. But I really am, other than delivering this information, kind of out of the picture after that. So just so you know. Yes, go ahead.
Do they take it in their class?
Yes. So it takes place in the classroom, on site at each elementary school. So whatever their homeroom classes, they'll, unless they have some sort of small group test accommodation, they'll take it with their whole group class. This piece is really important. It says parents may access their child's screening score on December 15th. On Parent Portal, how many of you are signed up for Parent Portal? If you're not, you need to get signed up for Parent Portal. You need to go online to BB Schools and sign up for Parent Portal. They'll send you an email with a PIN number. The PIN number you need to bring into school, into Red Mill with an ID, and they'll get you set up for Parent Portal. But that's where scores, you no longer get any sort of a letter sent to you. It's all accessed on Parent Portal. And that will be available on December 15th. So that's once they get everybody screened in the system. Everybody's are available December 15th. Okay, good. Okay, so you may have questions about the Naglieri. It's the Nonverbal Ability Test 2. And basically it's described as, like I said, I don't have access to the test. It's brief, and I can say that they ask for 45-minute blocks to get in and out. So that's giving directions, getting materials out, the whole 9 yards. When I set up the schedule, that's all they ask for. It's culture fair. It's a nonverbal measure of school ability. Basically, there shouldn't be any language barriers with it. There shouldn't be any sort of culture barriers with it. Fair across gender, race, and ethnicity. And it's universal in nature by using geometric shapes. Apparently shapes, patterns, things like that. So there shouldn't be any issue with the language piece there. What I will say is this: in 3rd grade, if your child is not identified in 1st grade and you feel like you want to have them retested, in 3rd grade there's a verbal component that's added to it. So that may be something that you think about further down the road. If you have a child who's extremely verbal, that may be where strength shows up for them in 3rd grade. Okay, so here's the referral. So students who scored the 90th percentile or above on the screening instrument are referred for further evaluation and consideration. Basically, that means I get a list. Here are the kids that scored in the 90th percentile or higher. That's all I get. If your child scores in the 89th percentile, I don't know that. I don't have access to any magic system that shows me all the kids' scores. You're welcome to contact me and we can discuss your child's score, but all I get are kids who score in the 90th percentile or higher. So basically, from that point in time, I will send home the information for the next steps. And the next steps would be filling out the application for testing. So it says parents, teachers, or others with knowledge of the child's abilities may refer him or her for consideration by the Gifted Identification Committee, even if the student does not score at the 90th percentile in the screening instrument. So this is a really big, important point for us. Basically what I do is this. I work with kindergartners and first grade students. I collect information on kindergarten and first grade students when I'm in there working with them. Before we get the results back from the screening, I always sit down with first grade teachers and say, who are our non-negotiables? Who do we really feel like we need to put up for testing? Because this screening score is one very small piece of this entire process. So don't be disappointed if your child doesn't score in the 90th percentile or higher. I have kids who have scored as low as the 75th percentile, have taken the second round, and have been accepted into ODC, which is now the Brickell Academy, which we'll address in a few minutes. Don't let this screening score disappoint you. That's what I really need to get across to you. I will sit down with teachers, we'll have our list. Like I said, unless they scored in the 90th percentile, I have no idea what any child on that list did, nor am I going to be jaded by that score even if I discuss it with the parents. If I've seen enough to put this child through the process, then I'm going to push to have them go through the process. So just know that. It may be something that you decide ahead of time. I'm assuming you're all interested in here. So you may just decide, you know what, I don't care what the score is. I'm going to go through with this process anyway. And you know what? You're not out anything. So if you feel strongly enough about it, go for it. And you know, the kids really don't think twice about these people coming and working with them. They really don't. So we'll talk about that a little more later. So basically, that's the thinking you need to be doing right now. How do I feel about this? Here's the big, big change down here. All our applications are done online now. There is no hard copy that goes home. The first grade application, I've included the link, and I'll go back. Actually, if you guys want to write it down, you can. If not, I'll send it to you closer to the December deadline. But basically, this is the application address that's available for everybody. Everything's done online. You will not be able to access it at all for first grade until after December 15th. So you can go and you can try to play around with it now and you can enter your students' information, and it's not going to let you in until after December 15th. Okay? So once you go to that link, which I will show you, it's like the Brandon family. It's not going to do it because I'm in PowerPoint. Okay, let me do this one. I'm going to close out of my PowerPoint. I think I'm going to have to for you to be able to see it. It really is an active Congress. I mean, it really is. So this is what you'll see. When you log in, and you'll need to go in as I am a student parent, okay? Because the default really is kind of the parent, you have to log in as a student. So what that login entails is it's your student's 6-digit number, like whatever their lunch number is, and then it's what their current password is. So students are constantly logging in with that password information at school. So you'll have to really kind of stay abreast as to what that password is at this point in time. If there's any problems, the teacher at any point in time can give you that password. Hopefully your child will be able to give you the password. It's probably a good idea in first grade to just kind of ask them for that number and password on a regular basis, because it's kind of like us, it becomes your social security number. I mean, it's just their default that they have to go to all the time. So you'll do the user ID, will be your child's, the 6-digit number, and then the password will be whatever their password happens to be at that point in time. Okay? So that's basically what it looks like. I can't log in because it's not live yet. But if you try to log in, it will tell you that it's not available until December 15th. But that's basically what it looks like. So how has that changed as far as, I'm just going to go this way. If I need to do anything else, we'll do it the good old-fashioned way. So how has that changed as far as the application itself goes? When you look here, and this is just another important note, students who are not referred based on screening results may be referred at a later date. So that could be, it could be that you're deciding at this point in time to go through the process. It could be, you know what, I don't know that my kid's ready yet. I don't know that I want to go through this process. I want to wait until 2nd grade. Your child can be tested once a year, regardless of what year they happen to be in. Now that being said, obviously they're screened in 1st, they're screened in 5th, so that will be when that takes place. The 2nd through 4th grade testing, if you decide you want to have your child tested, that's the one that takes place like in December. So that's a matter of what you decide. Maybe you say, I just don't think my kid's ready. I don't think my kid's following directions. I don't think that they're just ready to go through this process. I want to wait until 2nd grade. So if that's what you choose to do, you can contact me. We can go through with this process. It's any grade level up until their senior year, they can be tested once a year. Okay? So from there, we get into the application piece. In the past, the application, the hard copy application, had been split into 4 sections, which I'm still kind of referencing here. It's no longer separated per se as intense learning or analytical thinking or creativity. You just get the 20 questions. You decide if you think they show it almost all of the time, some of the time, seldom. You determine what they demonstrate in each area. There used to be where you could add comments at the bottom of each section, and that actually kind of freaked parents out, because they would say, I don't know if this particular example is intense learning or if it's analytical thinking. So now all the comments go at the end, which is kind of what I would stress the parents to do anyway. Don't try to force fit it into any one area. Just write a narrative about your kid. You know your kid better than anybody. So write it as a narrative piece. So that's, I guess they've decided that that is probably the better fit for everybody. So let's talk about intense learning. When you get asked these questions, like, it will still reference advanced vocabulary. What I really want to tell you today is you need to give the identification committee a true picture of what your child does at home. The teacher does a referral. The teacher will let the committee know what your child does at school. So if you say, yeah, they use advanced vocabulary because they're in the highest reading group at school, that reading group right now is reading Magic Treehouse, blah, 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 that's what the teacher's telling them. Okay? So rather than duplicate it, this is your chance to really give your child any accolades, anything that you see that really shows that they're thinking in a different way or an advanced way from their peers. Yes?
Are we supposed to focus just on what they're doing right now, or like if
No,
we see
that's
these
a great
signs all
question.
along? Kind
If at 18 months old they're asking this bizarre question that you went, where did that come from? Put it down.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is in their short lifespan. This is their autobiography. And that being said, and I'll reference this later, you have 5,000 characters to do it in. It's limited now. The teachers get 5,000 characters, the parents get 5,000 characters. So it's kind of like equal playing field across the board. So really make what you put in there count, okay? And I've been trying to figure out exactly what 5,000 characters is before because I guess I need to change word to characters because you're so used to seeing a word count. So it'll be interesting to see. But so that's where today's workshop really is important, to look for those really good specific examples, okay? What I will say is this: quality over quantity. They're not looking for just bullet of bing, 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 bing. It's not a grocery list of what your kid's done. It's good, specific examples that demonstrate behaviors, that demonstrate how they may be interacting with peers, things like that. How are they doing in maybe a scout group or at Sunday school or on a sports team? What do you notice that they're doing that really makes them stick out from other kids? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. The becoming totally absorbed in projects, reading at advanced levels, the concern for real world issues. There's been a lot of really bad news, natural disaster news that little kids get nowadays. They might not always get the political news, but they certainly get disasters and what's been shown. And if they're the kid who's trying to step up to the plate and come up with a way to solve this problem, how do we keep hurricanes? We're going to drag icebergs down to try to make the water cooler, whatever. If you see that whole problem-solving piece, and you'd be shocked in my job what I hear. Kids are brilliant. So, I always say I have to be on my A game every day, or they will eat me alive, because they're just on it. You never know what they're going to come up with. They drive a lot of the instruction that I do. I can go in with the best plan in the world, and it may go in a completely different direction. So that's what I'm looking for when I make notes on kids in the classroom, and that's what you need to be thinking about as a parent, okay? What have they done that has just made you go, now where did that come from? It came from their little gifted brains sometimes. So, really think back, and that's the glory of having this workshop this early. You have a really good span of time. You have over 3 months to be collecting this information. So you've got actually 4.5. You're welcome. 4.5 months to think about this. I always say a really good thing to do is carry Post-it notes with you. That way, if you carry Post-it notes and you kind of jot down on those Post-it notes, when you're limited to your 5,000 characters, then Post-it notes are really easy to kind of sort out. So you may say, oh yeah, that mimics this behavior, so this is something that I can let go because this is more important. So maybe carry some Post-it notes and get your little flow chart going and how you want all this to look in 5,000 characters. But really just think, if you have that moment that comes to you, oh, they were 3, they did this. Then jot it down on that note. And that sometimes helps you organize your thoughts a little bit. And just the factual knowledge. When they come up with something that you had no idea and you're like, oh yeah, I knew that, and you're on the internet to try to verify if it's true or not, that could be a sign too. Okay, then we have analytical thinking, problem solving. A lot of times this is where the math comes into play, that they see. It could be the puzzles, the speed at which they can do puzzles. It could be, that, I know that I was doing a lesson one time in 1st grade, and I'm expecting the kids to draw a picture, to show how this is being divided up, this number is being divided up based on this little story. I've got this kid writing this whole division fact. And all this is division. You take the whole number and you divide it by, and this is first grade. And I was like, yeah, that's what it is. So making connections, maybe they're making some kind of connection between what they read about in science and what they read about in social studies and what happens to be on the news right now. That whole big piece of a connection that you wouldn't even think to make sometimes. Understanding really complex ideas. I always say that comes with, especially if they have older siblings, that's a really easy way to determine if they understand complex ideas, because they join right in the conversation and they're jockeying for position and they have something to contribute. And that's huge a lot of times. And they're usually pretty self-confident about it. And then sharing unique perspectives. What twist might they have on something that's happening? And ask them. If you see, an event on the news and you see that they're looking at this event, start asking them questions about it. What do you think happened? How do you think this could have been prevented? What suggestions do you have? If you could write them a note, what would you tell them to do? Things like that. Because you'd be surprised, just really anecdotally at that point in time, what you could jot down that they might say. Okay, creative and productive thinking. Here's your questions. Your how and why questions. One of the first things that I do every year with any grade level is we write what's called fact questions. And those are the how and the why questions. The kids that really get what is a deeper level, what would lead to a great discussion, what may not ever be answered in the story that was read. Questions like that, it's not usually the who's or the what's. It's usually the how's and the why's. They adapt easily to new situations. And let's talk about that for a second. The adapting easily to new situations sometimes gets misinterpreted as it's easy for them. It might not be that it's easy for them, it might be below them. So, we always think of positive characteristics with gifted kids. It's not always glowing. They can be stubborn, they can be mouthy, things that we might interpret as not so glamorous characteristics. If you're sitting on the identification and placement committee, you're like, yep. Sarcasm, they get that adult humor that other kids may not get. That sometimes is misperceived as something that you probably shouldn't put on an application. You should. If they're bossy with all their friends, if they're the ones trying to run the show, then you probably should put that down. That's leadership qualities. So, don't shy away from, you're painting a picture. You're painting a true picture of your child's thinking and your child's behaviors. So don't, shy away from something that you might think, oh, they're going to look at that and go, no. Because it's not always perceived as being bad behaviors.
The adapt easily. You're talking more academic things, not social?
It can be either one. It can be, most of the time socially, gifted kids don't always adapt to the situations. And that's what I meant as far as, if you find that that's an issue, because a lot of times they're more mature than their peers, or they are thinking way above, and they're thinking, this is such a silly little game, that is so beneath me. Put it down. But yes, most of the time it is academic. They don't mind being put in different groups. Those groups being mixed up because they're going to just go right in there and take over it anyway. So, unique responses. There again, it might be your, at Christmas, they're the ones that take the boxes and build some funky little design out of it. They're going to start a store. They're going to do all these different little things in the neighborhood. They're going to rally the troops to save Haiti. That type of thing. So that's, what are they deciding that they can do to make this better? Teach humor in situations that others may not. They're the kids that, when you blow off steam, how you do that every once in a while, and you say something because it makes you feel better, and then they laugh because they totally get it. We call that sarcasm. So, you know, they get what you're saying sometimes when you don't want them to get what you're saying. So in what ways does your child demonstrate a high level of motivation? Now, let's talk about this for a second. A lot of times gifted children are only motivated if they enjoy what's going on. If they're not digging it, they're not going to put forth a lot of effort. So when you think about this, you need to think about what it is that your child really enjoys doing. It might be sports. It might be art. You know, you need to decide, what do you notice that they are really motivated to do? How do they show that, you know what, I'm not going to bed tonight because I can't get this off my mind. That type of thing. A lot of times it can be how they participate on a sports team. You know, they may be the ones that, as the coach is trying to call the play, they're in there telling the coach what the play needs to look like. You know, they've got it all figured out in their mind how they're going to score that goal. And so they're letting, with timeout coaches, you know, doing that type of thing. So that's that whole, you know, whatever you see, a lot of times, like I said, the behaviors mimic the thinking. And then does more than what's required. You know, if they're really motivated, they're going to do more than what is actually asked of them to do for that situation. And there may have been nothing asked for them to do. They may have initiated a project on their own. Okay, so once you have everything kind of put into play, and you can type it in a Word document first, so you can keep going back and changing, and then you can cut and paste it in the application when the time comes. But this is what you need to ask yourself. To what degree does the parent application allow the members of the Gifted Identification and Placement Committee to see the child outside of the school setting? Because they don't get a picture. I mean, that cute little grin with dimples is not going to sway anybody one way or the other. It's all based on what you write in that application. So how do they really get to see how your child interacts with other kids, what kind of thinking they do outside of the school setting? Now, if you're volunteering in the classroom, and you come in and you see something that you want to add to that application, that's absolutely fine. That's no problem at all to do that. But just, like I said, don't concentrate on, well, my child gets APs on everything. They have their report cards there. They know that. Don't waste your 5,000 characters on things like that, because they will look at your child's records when the time comes. So really think about behaviors and specifics when you fill this out. Okay, so here's your points of reflection. Will the Gifted Identification and Placement Committee get an accurate picture? And like I said, by accurate, it may not always be that you think it's, you're advocating for your child, but accurate is important. You know, it may be those behaviors that you perceive as not the most fitting behaviors for an application. They really are for this. Outside of the school setting, based on the information you've provided, have you provided specific examples? You will have a limit of 5,000 characters using the online application. And have you honestly portrayed your child's strengths and needs? You know, we always talk about strengths and weaknesses going together. Sometimes it's not a weakness. Sometimes it's what your kid needs. You know, there's a big difference between a weakness and a need. So, you know, what does your child need? Educationally, academically, socially, what does your child need? Okay, so then we go to testing. So that whole big application piece, you hit send by March 1st, you breathe a sigh of relief, and the testing date is March 29th. So what happens is they will still be tested at Red Mill by personnel from the Gifted Testing Department, but what's different is it's now not every first grader. So we, you know, however many kids have applications sent in, we form groups, and then we decide from there. It will all take place that day, but we decide from there how many groups we need to have tested. They'll determine how many testing specialists they need to send here. But basically, that's how it will happen on the 29th. And they will be pulled probably out of their classroom at this point in time. This room gets used quite frequently. If there's a particular classroom that has several kids that are going to be tested, a lot of times they'll keep those kids in and take the other kids out. So we just have to get kind of creative depending on what the numbers look like when the time comes. The other thing that I want to tell you is you can obviously start and stop the application. You can save as you go. So until you hit submit, it's not a done deal. And keep in mind, this is all new to us. I got trained on it last week and it wasn't even live when I got trained on it. So basically what we're being told is you'll get reminder emails if you start it, that it's kind of like your shopping bag if you are shopping at TJ Maxx online or something, and they say, hey, you left something in your shopping bag, you kind of get a message like that. Hey, you left this application unattended. So that's no big deal. It doesn't mean that once you start it that you only have a 2-week deadline. That deadline's in stone of March 1st. So once it becomes live on December 15th, you have any time from there to March 1st to work on it. So that's something for you to kind of keep in mind. Holiday season, when you get your kid home for a couple of weeks at the holidays, that's usually a good time to collect information too. Because they're dealing with family members that they haven't seen, maybe older cousins, things like that. It's usually a time where we give to the less fortunate. You may see behaviors during the holiday season that are really good for you to add to this too. So then information's collected to create a student profile. It includes the scores on the screening, the scores on the testing, the teacher input, the parent input, the academic achievement information. Like I said, they look at the records to know what the child is capable of. So all of that kind of comes together. There's not one piece that's going to make or break your child being identified. Yes?
So if your child does not score above the 90th, and you still fill out the application, does the teacher still give input?
Yes.
How is the teacher notified to give input?
As soon as you start an application, the teacher will get a message. That's a really good question because we're glad that that's happening. I'll get a message, the teacher will get a message. So we'll kind of know who's started. Supposedly I have a dashboard that I can monitor all the time of what's kind of out there. So I hope that that's true, to be able to have some sort of reference. And like I said, I apologize in advance for any kinks or glitches because it went live Friday afternoon. The application went live Friday afternoon, and I had like 3 emails over the weekend. So, and it was more just, how do I get in here type of thing, maybe they were using the wrong number, things like that. So don't hesitate to ask. It doesn't mean that I can get you an answer. It doesn't know that I know the answer, but I can get you an answer, or I can refer you to who would have the answer to it. So,
What went wrong on Friday? I thought it wasn't until December.
for the 2nd through 4th grade, that went live, and then for 5th grade, it goes live November 15th when those screening scores come out. So it's like this whole process of pieces. They had hoped to get it live October 1st, and then with the rain that happened a couple weeks ago, it kind of pushed it back, and we didn't get trained. My training was supposed to be today, one of those rain days, and so it just, everything's kind of got pushed back a little bit. But it looks pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about it. Okay, so here's what you can tell your child. Get a good night's sleep, eat a nutritious breakfast. I wouldn't harp on the entire screening or testing a lot. I would say, hey, somebody is coming, but you can say that it's a friend of mine. One of Miss Clark's friends is coming today. They're going to sit down. They're going to do some work with you. You need to listen very carefully. They come in the mornings before lunch, thank goodness, because I don't know what happens to them when they go to the cafeteria, but they're completely different people when they walk out of there. So they will come before lunch, and basically they'll go ahead and do this screening, and then we'll, just basically have them screen ready to go by that date, So they'll just say, come on in, and, just listen, do your best. Let them know that, it's going to be half hour, 45 minutes, okay? And then, really that good night's sleep, don't talk it up too much because that may keep them from wanting to, don't stress them out. Okay?
And you said the NNET is nonverbal. What kind of test is the test?
It's the second
Yeah.
version, it's the COGAT, which is a cognitive abilities test. So that's what they'll use for the actual testing instrument.
Is that
COGAT.
also nonverbal or?
I can give you the number to the gifted testing department, and which I'll do at the end. Any questions like that, like I said, I don't get access to it, so they'll be happy to discuss any of the instruments. But yeah, good question. Okay, so then we have identification. So once all this is done, so now we flash forwarded all the way to like mid-May. Doesn't that sound good? And it says, the Gifted Identification and Placement Committee meets to review all information. And then it says, they use a multiple criteria approach to identification. Basically what will happen when the identification committee meets, it's principals, it's assistant principals, it's counselors, it's gifted resource teachers, it's classroom teachers, it's high school, it's, I mean, just pulling from any area to make it just as fair as it possibly can be. You know, you have professionals from all areas coming. I was actually invited this year to sit on eligibility, so I will be able to sit on 1st, 5th, and anybody who's going to the Brickell Academy. But that being said, I obviously can't sit for children that I service, so that's something that they also have to look at. They don't want you having anybody who knows that child outside of this application. So I wish I could, but I can't. So basically what will happen, and I'm going to go ahead and show you this because this is important. This is the federal definition of gifted and talented. The term gifted and talented, when used with respect to students, children, or youth, means students, children, or youth who give evidence of high achievement capability in such areas as intellectual, creative, artistic, or leadership capacity, or in specific academic fields, and who need services or activities not ordinarily provided by the school in order to fully develop those capabilities. So it's pretty loaded, but that is what the federal definition of giftedness is. So now let's talk about what all this means. Once all of this happens, so now we've gotten, everything is done. And so now you get notified. So here's what you will be notified of. It says, parents are notified by mail of the decision of the Gifted Identification and Placement Committee, and they may access their child's test scores on Parent Portal. So once that second round of testing goes through, you'll be able to access those scores. I don't know when you can access those. If I find out, I'll let you know, but I don't know when those usually go live. But the decision won't be on Parent Portal with those scores anyway. So basically, you'll get a letter at that point in time. And this letter will say a couple of things. It will say your child either has been identified, or has not been identified, or has been put on hold. Okay? So let's talk about what that means. If they're identified, it says they will receive gifted services through the resource cluster model at Red Mill or the Brickell Academy at ODS. So here's what, when you go to fill out that application, the Brickell Academy is what was referred to before as Old Donation Center, Kemp's Landing. They're building that new, beautiful building over near Bayside Hospital where Bayside Library is. I mean, this building looks amazing. So they've got this new building that they're building. Right now they're housed in the old Princess Anne Middle off Seaboard Road. They've been there for a couple of years, which has been really nice for our students because they haven't had to go all the way across town to go to ODC. So this is it for that. It's going to drive your girls down. So that's something for you to keep in mind. What, if you're not familiar with ODC, what ODC is it's a truly identified academic environment, which means every child that goes to ODC, that is placed in the classes at ODC, is identified academically gifted. So whereas we might have 6, 8, 10 kids in a class here, a cluster class, every child that's in those classes is identified. When you go to fill out your application, it will give you the option to check ODS, Brickell Academy. My suggestion to you, even though it's moving across town and it's a long ways, my suggestion to you is if you are even remotely considering your child going there, you check it then. Okay? Because you have to think about it. It becomes a numbers game. They don't accept children until second grade because they're not identified until first grade. So when they're forming that new group of kids, the 125 kids or whatever they're taking that year, they're pulling from 55 first grade or 55 schools of first graders in Virginia Beach. So they're picking from thousands of kids. So if you think it's something that you're interested in, check it then. You can always say no. If your child gets identified and gets accepted into the Brickell Academy, you don't have to accept that. You're zoned Red Mill, you're always welcome to come to Red Mill. But if you are even thinking that it's something that you want to consider with your child, go ahead and check it. The Brickell Academy Information Night for first grade is February 2nd. And I will give you more information about that. I don't know if the new building will be opened.
April 3rd.
April 3rd, okay. So I don't know that the building would be open for, I doubt they would do
I
the
don't
open
think
house.
February.
I was kind of hoping they'd have it ready. I know that the weather has really kind of pushed things back too. So it will probably be held over at the location on Seaboard Road. What I would do at some point in time, and I would think, I have not heard this, but I would think that they would have a second time for you to bring your child to the new building. I would think they'll probably even have some sort of just public opening for you to kind of tour the building anyway.
Yeah.
Do they have
I
one?
think they are planning
Yeah,
that.
it
I
would-
can't remember if there's a
It would
date.
make sense that they were going to do something like that, but I haven't officially heard that yet. But what I would suggest you do is let your child know this is not where you would be going. It's not right around the corner from mom and dad. I mean, really take that drive and go to where that building is and let them know. It's all the way across town.
It's an hour bus ride.
It is. It's an hour bus ride, and it's a lot. That means it's an hour bus ride home again. So your child would be spending 2 hours on the bus. But check it if you're interested, because if you say, oh yeah, I don't think so, I don't think for second grade, I think we'll try it for third grade. There was, for third graders last year, like only a couple of spots that were available for those second graders that decided to apply. Because unless somebody leaves that program, maybe they move or whatever, there's just not the spots for the kids. So really the best time to try to get them in is for second grade. So I would check the box and then turn it down later if they get offered, if you're not sure that that's where you want them to go. And then the other thing that, if they're identified and you say, you know what, Brickell Academy's not for us, too far away, they stay at Red Mill and they get placed in what's called a gifted cluster class. And basically what that means is I go into the classes and teach with those teachers. I plan with those teachers, and we take whatever kids happen to be identified gifted and split them between those two classes. And that's what we consider our cluster classes at Red Mill. And it does mean that they do get curriculum that's different from the average grade level, what the average grade level gets.
So there's 2 cluster rooms per grade?
There's 2 clusters per grade. Yeah. And that, there again, you know, you can say what percentage of kids normally get identified in first grade. It varies from year to year. You know, if we have 120 kids, probably 20 will get identified. That's usually a pretty good number to go by. 20 might get identified. And of those 20, I guarantee you, there's probably 7 or 8 on that list that weren't on that original 90% screening list. So, like I said, don't be jaded by that screening score. And you know, if you're talking your kid, there's a big difference between your kid having an 85% and a 15% too. You know, if they're at that 85%, that's not that far from 90%. That's a question or two that a 6-year-old didn't answer the right way. You know, so really think about it realistically. The other thing that may happen is you may get that your child has been placed on hold. And what that means is maybe there was a huge discrepancy between the two scores, but the teacher input form was really strong, the parent input form was really strong, and they're saying, you know what, we're not going to write this kid off yet. So they will be placed into a cluster class, knowing that they will definitely be working with me to where I can collect more information on them, and then they will be tested again in second grade. You'll kind of go through that process again, but it gives the opportunity to have more information added to it. It could be that your kid had a bad day on one of those days. You know, there's something there that allows them to want to look at this child some more. Okay, that being said, it doesn't matter if your kid gets placed in a cluster in second grade. If you want your kid tested in second grade, you can have your kid tested. So, you know, like I said, once a year you can have them tested. So this isn't just a one and done and it never happens again, because they'll get screened again in fifth and you can have them tested at any point in time. Okay? Now this is that phone number I was talking about. It's 757-263-6870. They are fabulous. I cannot say enough about the testing specialists that we work with. They are professional, they are knowledgeable, they beg us to refer parents to them rather than give a wrong answer on something. You know, they really, and you can imagine, there's legal reasons for that, but they really are very, very, very helpful. They are really good about answering any questions that you may have. So what you have to remember is they're out in the field testing those days. So you may not get a human, you may get an answering machine, and then they will contact you later that day. Like on our screening days, they're usually out at here by like 11:30. Now, that being said, a lot of times if Three Oaks had 3 kids absent on their screening, then they're running over there to try to get those kids screened. So the other thing is, if for some reason you plan your Disney vacation October 26th, it doesn't mean that we write your child off. They will do their absolute best to try to come back and screen them. We've had kids who just had like really kind of bizarre illnesses and things that every time they've tried to come in to screen them, they haven't been here for them to screen. So they've screened and tested the same day if they have to sometimes. They really try to do everything in their power to get to every child. So they're wonderful. I can't say enough about them. And then, here's me. You already have it on the flyer. It's just my short email address is janclark@bbschools. If you have any further questions, I put a computer there because most of the time I'm in the classroom. I'm not in, you know, having discussions with parents and things. I do have a phone extension, but I'm not by that phone very often at all. And email's really the quickest way to contact me. I even carry my phone sometimes just to be able to pull up email when I go from class to class. So I do suggest that you email. That doesn't mean you can't call and leave me a message. I will certainly call you back if you do. There's some things that are too lengthy to be addressed over email. But if you have a quick question about something I said today, or you know, you want me to look at an application, I am perfectly happy to look at applications. You know, obviously it's not the good old-fashioned form where you bring in the hard copy, so I'd be looking basically probably at your Word document of comments, which is really the bigger thing. I wouldn't sway you one way or the other about checking an area. That's not my place to do that, but I could let you know about this, you know, how specific your comments are. If you're trying to decide between, you're running out of room on the application and you're trying to decide, do I want to give this example or this example, I'll be happy to give you my input. That doesn't mean that it's in stone, but I would give you my input as to what I think would be the better example if I were sitting on the committee. Okay? Questions? I know it's a lot. It's a lot of information, and it's a long process, and you know what? We always get through it every single year. Usually it snowed on our winter testing date, so I'm really excited. that we have a March 29th and an October 26th, so we may avoid snow. We always have the snow day, just like we had the rain day on the 5th grade screening. I don't know what it is about Red Mill, but anyway, we seem to be cursed. That being said, I promise I'll do my best to try to get that curse lifted. If you have questions, please feel free. Like I said, email is usually the quicker way for me to get a response to you, because I may be going down the hall typing the response. But feel free to reach out and contact me. There is a ticket, just kind of how'd you feel about today's workshop? Be honest, please. Any comments that you can give to help me, I appreciate. Like I said, I know it's a lot of information, and I hope I didn't forget anything, and I hope you felt comfortable enough to ask any questions that you may have. And I love working with your kids. Everybody, we're in a great place. If you don't realize that, we're really in a good place. So. Did you? Yeah. Smart move.
You make sure. When it's dealing with like gifted and everything, like I see signs of my son,
Right.
not verbal, but math.
Okay.
So it's not something like I'm looking for him to go to the Brickell
Right.
Academy, but I mean, he's already wanting to learn his times tables
Yeah.
and learning things.
And that's the type of examples you should be putting down.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I just feel like he needs that extra push
Right.
for math,
Right.
not necessarily language.
Well,
but
and-
I know that can come hand in hand because you're learning lots of other
Right.
things with it, but
Well, and the thing that you have to remember is, even if your child's in a gifted cluster class, we differentiate. I mean, there are groups, like, it may be that your child does fantastic in number sense, in computation, but
Right.
doesn't do well in geometry. So those groups are fluid. In
Okay.
language arts and in, we're really even trying to do some in science. I mean, we do a lot of experiments and things here, so we're really trying to make them as fluid as possible. The flexible seating has helped a lot with that. Some of the classrooms that are kind of buying into the flexible seating, which has been very interesting. That's helped a little bit with some of that. Because the kids don't necessarily realize they're being grouped, So, and that's important to any child. I don't care if they're gifted or not. They need to be with a group of peers and being taught on their level. So, even in the cluster, we do small grouping.
My son didn't attend kindergarten here,
Mhm.
so does that put him at a disadvantage in terms of your screening?
No. No. I take notes every time I'm
So
in
you
there.
go in person?
And like I said, the teachers are limited to 5,000 characters also. So what we'll usually do is, like I said, we make that list. We'll have that list made, and we're not going to tell you if your kid's on the list or not. But we'll have that list made ahead of time based on things that we've seen. And then they'll start collecting information. It's a lot. When you're asking a teacher to fill out 10 referrals on children, think about the one you're stressing over. They're asked to do that times 10 sometimes. So that's a lot of work, and like I said, they used to have a 2-week window to do that in, which was crazy. So what I do is I collect information, and I will send that to the teachers, and then we'll sit down with the information that they've collected and the information that I've collected, and we'll do a referral form together on the child, so that it is seen from perspectives. And that's interesting conversation sometimes, because what they see as negative behaviors, I'm like,
Red flag.
put it down. So it's kind of interesting sometimes, the discussions that we have. So there is a lot of time that goes into it, but it's worth it. So any more questions? Please contact me or the gifted testing department with any questions that you have. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.